Well, thank you very much. And thank you, folks, for tuning in. I'm sorry there was a bit of a mix-up about the title originally. I hope you're not expecting an in-depth study of Tilman and all his expeditions, because really I should perhaps have called it Followers on After Tilman. And again, I hope there's not too little Tilman and too much Bob Shepton in this lecture, but we've got to say something, so it will be a personal odyssey, as it says here in the title. So Tilman, this fascinating but enigmatic character. It was strange, really. One of the few people, I think, who served both in both world wars. And with some distinction, he managed to get a DSO, a Distinguished Service Order, and an MC, a Military Cross, and Bar, which means he got 2 military crosses. So he did well, but really at heart, Tilman was a Himalayan climber, both before and after World War II. In fact, it was a close run thing as to whether he or John Hunt would be appointed the leader of the 1953 Everest expedition, which eventually managed to climb Everest. I think John Hunt was a better team player, perhaps, and maybe a better organizer. Bill Tilman was rather a loner and not such a good team player, really. But in latter years, and here's where we go, he bought a Bristol pilot cutter. And he sailed it to remote places and climbed mountains from the boat. Actually, in spite of what this jersey says, the first boat that he bought was Mischief, the one he was most fond of, really. And he sailed 110,000 miles in Mischief. He bought her in 1954 in Valletta in Malta. And by amazing coincidence, as I was preparing, I suddenly realized that actually I was in Malta in 1954 as a young officer in 4th Commando Royal Marines. We were actually housed or stationed up at Hindafir in the northern end of the island. But Valletta was the main town, and we obviously knew Valletta very well. But in those days, I'd never heard of Bill Tilman, and I certainly wouldn't have known one end of a pilot cutter from the other. So that was the only coincidence. But he bought this pilot cutter, and as I say, sailed off into the world. This actually was Sea Breeze, which was his second boat. And I'm indebted to Bob Cumley. I hope I'm saying your name right, Bob, if you're there, for this picture. And indeed, the picture before that, either that jersey or that jacket is Bob Cumley's. Somehow Tilman had purloined it. I'm not quite sure how. But here is the point of the whole exercise, as it were. The point was that Tilman, whether I think unconsciously and unintentionally, started a real purpose or new purpose for sailing, perhaps a new trend, if you like, this sailing away into remote areas and climbing mountains from the boat. Well, when we sail around the world, and here, of course, is the first non sequitur at this lecture, because what has sailing around the world got to do with Tilman? Actually nothing, because he didn't sail around the world, but there is a connection which I hope will become obvious a little bit later on. I have a confession to make here that I did give a shortened version of this talk a year or so ago at the centennial celebrations of the Cruising Club of America in Newport, Rhode Island, more or less there. And why did I do that? Because all blue medal medalists were invited to the centennial celebrations of the Cruising Club of America. And Steve Brown, the rogue, had maneuvered me into giving the lecture on behalf of the Blue Water medalists. And so that's why I was doing it. So when we started to sail around the world, and I should explain, of course, that the purpose of this was the first school group to sail around the world. They did actually have to have left the school. For some reason, the governors wouldn't allow present pupils to come along. Two of them came all the way around, Dude and Pevs. They all had nicknames by now. And we changed to Barney and Ian were the first two, 6 or 7 places as we went round the world. So, okay, not strictly to do with Tilman, but it's a good ocean cruising club thing to do, to go around the world in a lightning tour as we're going to now. So here we are leaving Falmouth in September, and here we are at Port Stanley in the Falklands in December, just before Christmas. You'll be glad to hear that they have in recent years renewed this jetty, which was falling to pieces at the time. But the whole idea for us was to go down to Antarctica. And here was a leopard seal that had just had its breakfast of penguins there down in Antarctica. There was a small interruption when south of the Shetland Islands, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the mast fell down. Well, this was a little bit awkward, but first things first, Henry Lloyd had asked for pictures of his gear in extreme circumstances, so we gave him a picture of his gear in extreme circumstances, though I don't think he ever actually used it. But this is really a lecture on its own, and so suffice it to say that we did manage to put up half of the mast, and by putting the foresail, this was in the days before roller reefing, with the foot acting as the luff and sheeting it right back to a cleat at the aft end, it made a good, very good reaching sail. And here we are at Cape Pembroke, just approaching the Falklands, and back at the town pier there in Port Stanley with half a mast. Amazingly, actually, I thought we're really going to get clobbered here crossing Drake's Passage, the stormiest seas in the world. But in actual fact, we took 7 days to do the 738 miles back, because going diagonally across and with the predominant winds southwest and northwest, we made good time. But the question was now, of course, what shall we do? It's getting a bit late in the Antarctic summer, but fortunately at the same time, Jerome Ponce in his famous boat, Damien II, the red one here, this is, here was Philippe Poupon, another French sailor, in those days, a fairly famous racing sailor. He was doing here, having time off with Christine, just cruising around. But Jerome Ponce pulling in, I took the opportunity of asking him, because he was the guru of Antarctic sailing at that time. And his reply was very interesting. Oh, Cape Horn, yes, he's French, of course. Cape Horn, yes, Avril, yes. More gales, less severe. And actually, he turned out to be completely correct. So anyhow, we thought, well, okay, we will go down to Antarctica again. We've just about got time to do that, and around Cape Horn in April. So back to Antarctica. Again, really a lecture in its own right, but what we were trying to do, or what we did, was South Shetlands, Deception Islands, explored the peninsula here, through the Le Maire Channel, and to the Faraday base, the British Antarctic Survey base at Faraday, as it was in those days. It's now been sold to the Ukrainians, which must be rather interesting. rather a nice line here about passing Cape Horn. When we passed the longitude of Cape Horn, we didn't actually see it because it was 490 miles to the north. But there we were rounding the Horn, and there was Jerome Ponce completely correct, gale after gale after gale, but nothing too severe, not the huge, great ship-breaking rollers that can come right from the west through to the east, funneled through the passage between South America and Antarctica. This is just to say that Cape Horn can be quite rough, though, as I say, not as rough as it can be. Eventually, we managed to reach 50 degrees south, and I suppose I must just pause to make a point here that really to round the Horn properly, you must have gone from 50 degrees south one side of South America to 50 degrees south the other side. I get a little bit, well, what's the word, disgruntled when people whip out from Peter Williams, go around Cape Horn Island and say they've rounded the Horn. They've rounded Cape Horn Island, but they haven't actually rounded the Horn in the true sense of the word. Well, that's nonsense anyhow, but here we were making our way through the gales up towards Easter Island. Each circle is the site of a noon site. Though fortunately by this time, we took the noon sites off the GPS because rather than by the traditional sextant angle, but which was a much great relief for me because my maths is terrible and I'd always struggled with astronavigation as a result. But steadily we made our way up north, still the trip punctured every so often by having to put about because of the gales and so forth. But eventually, at last, we arrived in Easter Island. And here we are in Anaka Bay, Anakena Bay, I mean, on Easter Island. This was the first moe that was lifted to stand upright again by Tor Heyerdahl when he visited the island and wanted to do it by the traditional methods, using trees as levers and trunks and ropes and getting the local population to pull to stand the moe up again. These were put up later on. But it was a fascinating place. Here we are at the factory where they, as it were, on this hill or in this hill where they were carved out. Over the centuries, land has slipped down here to cover them up. They were much, much taller than that, of course, originally, but it was a very interesting place and a very interesting island. The only trouble with Easter Island is that the wind kept changing direction, so you have to go from one side to the other regularly to get some shelter from the wind as it changes round. Pitcairn, or we haven't got there yet, sorry, because I was always fascinated by this carving, if you like, of a European ship. There were one or two isolated visits by European ships over the centuries in the history of Easter Island. Pitcairn, as I say, another fascinating place. They burnt the Bounty to sink it here in Bounty Bay so that there wouldn't be any evidence that they were there. Still only 51, or when we were there, only 51 inhabitants, all descended from the mutineers, except for the New Zealand pastor and the New Zealand teacher. But this was also where I learned how to harvest bananas, because they said, would you like some bananas for your trip? Oh, well, that'd be very nice. So we went into the forest and they proceeded to hack down a whole tree. I said, look, we only just wanted a bunch or two. Oh, don't worry about that, they said. Another one will grow up in no time. So apparently in the tropics, that's how you harvest bananas. Maria was much more what we thought of as Polynesia. we didn't, or rather I didn't, like Papeete at all. Huge, bustling, big, noisy French city plonk down in Polynesia. But here it was much more as what we had expected from Polynesia, and Bora Bora was much the same, though a little bit touristy. Through Fiji to a highlight of the voyage, which was Vanuatu. Here we are at Champagne Beach in Espiritu Santo, and we're the only people on that beach. When we were there, it was not spoiled by tourism. I don't know quite how it would be today. But a good place to chill out, as Dude found as he rested from all those miles that he'd already done. Then through the Torres Strait to Darwin, where we actually lifted out for a bit of TLC on the boat. My daughter, with a friend of hers, had joined us, perhaps not so immediately a member of the school, but we thought the close relationship with the previous chaplain, myself, was good enough. And so she joined us from Fiji here to Darwin. From Darwin to Cocos Keeling, the biggest atoll in the world, just everything that you would expect from a tropical atoll. Beautiful, clear, crystal water, white sandy beach, palm trees, sunshine, and beautiful swimming. So across the Indian Ocean, Mauritius, where my wife came out, so we met up and had some holiday together, and then down to Port Richards in South Africa, arriving just in time for Christmas, literally actually on Christmas Eve. I got to church and the lads got to a party, so Honor was satisfied on both counts. But here we are, gently recovering from a very good Christmas lunch. Spotting a weather window round Capagallas, quite stormy around Capagallas as usual, and so up to Cape Town, where we charged up and down for Tim Russon of Central Television South, where the school was situated, who had at last realized that actually it would be quite a good thing to make a film of this trip of schoolboys going around the world. So we put on a bit of a show for him, and he left a camera on board, which did actually have rather fatal or near fatal results, as we caught a blue marlin on the line at the stern of the boat. And in trying to get this blue marlin, I was filming it standing on the bridge deck. The lads lost their concentration, and bang, the boom whacked me there on the side of the head. I was actually knocked out for a few seconds and was in my bunk, not feeling too good for 4 days or so. But fortunately, after 4 days, I was able to get up and come back on watch. And so up to St. Helena. More British, really, than Britain. And of course, a very interesting place is where Napoleon was incarcerated, and eventually actually where he died. And here we are at the top of Jacob's Ladder, which some of you may well have done at St. Helena, 690 plus steps right up to the top there, looking down on the harbour. And so further north, Ascension Island, and then on March 17th, 803, we had sailed round the world because we had crossed our line out. So up to the Azores, up to Crosshaven, Dunleary, and across to Holyhead for a final welcome. Bishop Mike came for a short service, if you like, of a welcome and Thanksgiving. And nearly all the crew managed to assemble there as we had finished now sailing around the world. I think there's 2 or 3 missing. I'm not sure which ones. Of course, there's Pebs and, oh, I shouldn't do that. Pebs and Dude there behind him, and the rest of the crew. It involved 15 of us altogether, this sail around the world. Well, then, what should we do now? This was the question. Sail around the world. Well, Antarctica had been a marvelous place. Oops, hit the right buttons in there. Dramatic, fantastic. This was the Faraday base, as was and still is, but now with the Ukrainians. And there had been plenty of challenge, getting through the Le Maire Channel with a huge iceberg here blocking it, just allowing a narrow entrance. Pushing through the Meek Channel with no leads at all, very, very gently, and pushing the growlers away with the poles. And again, pushing through and enjoying the challenge of the event. But think about it, or we thought about it. It had taken 3 months to get from Falmouth to the Falklands, and say you did a month's touring Antarctica and exploring Antarctica, 2 or 3 months again to get back again. This was a long time out of a year, and my wife, in spite of her incredible tolerance, did say that she would like to see me occasionally. So that really wasn't quite on. I must have been reading Tilman's book, and here we've got the connection at last. And I suddenly realized, well, look, I could sail to Greenland, I could climb mountains that hadn't been climbed before, and I could sail back all in one summer. And it was a no-brainer. So that's what we decided to do. Whether just peak bagging, this is actually this summit, though there's an optical illusion, it doesn't look as if it is, but that was 900 on Northumberland Island. Tea break on the way down, or straightforward rock climbing. This was the first ascent of Sanderson's Hope, just south of Upernavik in the northwest of Greenland. We're just inspecting it here. We made a route, or rather, my team made a route up here and took the central crack line all the way up and then out at the top there. Or another way of rock climbing from the boat, or ski mountaineering. Here we are at the start of the Tilman traverse across Violet Island. We were repeating the traverse that he had made years before. Violet Island is the big island at to the north side of Baffin, which is, in fact, the second biggest island in the world, Greenland being the biggest. And here we are halfway, making camp by a glacier pool here. And it was 70K. It took us 10 days, and we took in 8 unclimbed peaks on the way. Some of them are considerably harder than these 2. We had made a little camp here, carved out a shelf before we climbed those 2 as we proceeded on. We'd had a bit of a difficulty getting to the start, because I happened to look out at the hedge window early one morning, and there was this pack ice being brought in very, very swiftly by the tide, and we were soon very entrapped by it. You can see we got a pole out there trying to push it away, but with not a great deal of success. But fortunately, the tide that had brought it in, when the tide turned, began to take it out again. And after 2 days, we were able to get up to Cape Liverpool, because that picture on the front cover of Tilman's book is actually him there about to start the Violet Island traverse. And we reciprocated his start and completed his traverse through. Or talking of ski mountaineering, Polly Murray, the first Scots girl to climb Everest, with her climbing partner Tash, made a 30-kilometer ski and climb along the spine of Herbert Island, right there in the very far northwest of Greenland, near Cannock and Thule. And then also one year, here we are at Northumberland Island, near Herbert Island, again in the northwest of Greenland. beautiful skiing. Not so beautiful bivvying, but it's interesting that they chose to bivvy on the boulders rather than on the very, very cold ice and snow of the Traverse. Not exactly comfortable, but at least they got a good night's sleep. It was a long way, and at the end, they had what I call 3 miles of Corrie moguls to get over in order to get to the seashore. And here they are calling us on the radio to say that they've got there. That was fine, except in the middle of the night, the tide came in and started to swamp the tent. And they had to move all their gear in the tent up higher. They had been deceived into thinking that they were above the tide line, but in fact they weren't. But next morning we came in and rescued them and got them to the boat, which had anchored as close as we could in the rather shallow water of that. And so they had completed a really fearsome traverse right the length of Northumberland Island, taking in a lot of peaks, new peaks on the way. And here we are at the beach where we picked them up. We later on by foot climbed these two as well, just to add a few of the first ascent of those peaks in Northumberland Island. But all this is by way of saying what a marvelous combination sailing and climbing is when they're put together like that. And so that's what we did. We kept now going to Greenland and climbing from the boat. Rather a famous picture, or I like to think that it is as it is. I actually had quite a lot of difficulty getting that picture, standing up in a rubber dinghy, as you can imagine, in order to get the whole boat showing through the hole in the iceberg. Such a beautiful place. Difficult to imagine that on the west coast of Greenland. It was probably midnight, in fact. And then one morning, got up early at 5 o'clock, looked out, and there was this incredible sight of the mountains reflected completely in the mirror calm waters of Eviksfjord there on the west coast of Greenland. Weaving through icebergs. I put that one in just to show what you all know already, of course, that there's a great deal more ice below the water of an iceberg than there is above the water. Very difficult to tell the proportion, 6/8, 7/8, no, not as much as 7/8, but 6/8 perhaps. One thing I have learned about pack ice, and this is actually getting out of the Northwest Passage, is that when you look at it from a distance, it looks completely impregnable. Only as you get close to it do you see that there may be leads through. Some people say you shouldn't actually enter pack ice unless you can see clear water at the far end. I don't actually agree with that because what lies on the horizon is still going to look completely impregnable until you actually get closer to it. And in fact, we only just got out of the Northwest Passage by entering this and weaving 8 to 10 miles through this pack ice to get out to the other side and so up to Lancaster Sound. Plenty of wildlife. Here's a minke whale. One knows it's a minke whale because the fin is much further to the back, if you like, than on other whales. One year, as we came out of Asiat, just round the corner from the island 2 miles or so to the north, the whales put on something of a show for us. If you see a polar bear that close, it's time to get your rifle, which in fact we did. But one year, approaching Baffin Island, there were 2 huge fields of pack ice just coming away from the coast. We had been delayed in Greenland because this pack ice stays much longer on the Baffin side than it does on the Greenland side. But as we weaved through, we saw no less than 8 polar bears. I was actually quite concerned in my ignorance at the time. That we were 75, 80 miles out from the coast. It was a long swim back, I thought. I've since learned that actually a polar bear can swim 300 miles to get some food if it wants to. so I needn't have worried at all. Our friends, and of course, that prehistoric animal, the musk oxen, who form a defensive line or circle if they've got young, if you approach them too closely. Such a beautiful place. Can't really think why anybody sails anywhere else. But we have to realize that we are imposters. After all, the Inuit have been using the sea for subsistence living for centuries and have managed to survive, either with a kayak here, hunting, or an umiak, which was a bigger boat. On the west side of Greenland, it's often known as the women's boat because they used to row. But in Alaska, it's anybody's boat, and they use it, or used to use it, for hunting the whale from an umiak. I included it because Mike Jacks has called his boat umiak, and you might like to see a picture of one. There we are. And so here comes the wild bunch. And actually, they're standing here at the top of their 10-day assault of the Impossible Wall, a big, big line that I had seen passing through Sortyhull Fjord several times and always considered it impossible because I never had a team who would be daring or stupid enough to attempt it. 850 meters, turned out to be E6, 6B, 512 if you're doing American grading. And here we are as it looked. Of course, they're not wild at all. But I had checked on the website before meeting them on our very first expedition. And I saw that whenever they got to the top of their supreme climbs, they jumped and danced and sang and hollowed and yelled and generally were wild. So I dubbed them the Wild Bunch, and I'm rather pleased to say that the name seems to have stuck. And here we are about to embark on another expedition. We're here in Asiat. I'd gone out early to prepare the boat, and they had just joined us now. We went into Uminak Fjord, waiting for the ice to clear over on Baffin, and to Ikerasak, with its iconic mountain just above. You can just see the settlement there on the left-hand side, and this is 6 o'clock in the morning or so. We thought at first that this was all too loose for climbing, but Sean, who loves to climb and will climb anything, had gone up and came back with news that he didn't think it was quite as loose as we thought. And of course, there was the Alpine Ridge here and another arête here, which would possibly we'd be able to climb. And so then we set sail from the sweet coast, and we were sailing away with a cargo of bricks from a grand city hall in New York. 'Twas a wonderful craft, she was rigged fore and aft. Oh, how the wild wind blowed her, she took several blasts, and she stood 7 masts. And we called her the Irish Rover. Du beau caillou. Allez. Hop. Merci. Merci. Un peu de litière de chat. Un peu de litière de chat. Au moins, il y a une belle vue, quoi. Ouh, ouh, ouh. Ship struck a rock. My God, what a shock! The boat, it turned right over. It turned 9 times around, and the poor old dog was drowned. Not quite as solid as they thought. And the last of the Irish Rover. What I'd really like to do is push the boat bow into that and see whether it would open it up enough to actually crack it open.
It does not seem like a good idea, Bob. I think the only thing that's going to crack open is the bow itself.
Well, that is just a slight inconvenience to the operation, I grant you.
We have an iceberg that's grounded on top of our anchor, so we can't take the anchor up, so we're stuck here.
The idea is to lighten the ice flow so that when it's high water, it floats.
So Bob has prepared some hammers and axes, and he's going to try and break the iceberg. Oh my God, it looks like a bad idea.
Don't get that overhang falling on you.
So as you can see, our captain is gone mad. Oh, jeepers.
Well, he works, actually. Oh, Bob, stay here.
Bob, let it go, let it go. Move away, Bob, move away, move away, move away. Oh my God, he is Moses. Oh my God, oh my God. He was there just a few seconds ago, he was there.
What happened?
Like Moses through the Red Sea, he cut through the iceberg with an axe.
How did that happen?
Look at that thing.
You must have great strength, Bob.
It's gone off the anchor, I think, Bob.
I'm glad I moved away when that big bit came out.
Yeah, that would have been hilarious.
All of the day's work, you know. 2 or 3 blows from that and the thing exploded. Well, anyhow, we've achieved our object. Okay, after those shenanigans. So across to Baffin. Here's the Walker Spur, or Walker Spire. And of course, they set about climbing it. Unremittingly steep, right up in the extreme grades. It was fortunate that on their first attempts, they were defeated in the sense of feeling that they should give up because of a snowstorm. Because on their third attempt, when they did manage to climb it, they found that this tower at the back was by far the most technical part of the climb. And there we are. Eventually, they managed it 900 meters. Again, E6, 6B, 1512, if you're American. And it was too good a picture not to include it with all that background as well. Of course, we were taking Tilman to the extremes because these fjords drop steeply straight into these walls. I mean, drop steeply straight into the fjords, and the fjords are very, very deep. So we were able actually to bring Dodo to light right alongside the wall, the mount of the cliff, and to secure it to chocks in cracks fore and aft. And it was a first, actually, even for the wild bunch, they could step off the boat straight onto the climb. Here they are making a little bit more progress, getting another view of it. I always love this picture. It's really the climber's view of base camp as they look down. But actually, when they started to clean stones and grass out of it and it began to fall onto the boat, I thought it was time to take the boat off, to go off and have a look at a huge iceberg that was just in the vicinity there in Sortie Hall. Or the turret, was it called, the east face of the turret here. They wanted to climb the sheer wall up, and there had been no routes done on this at all over there in the Walker Inlet of Baffin. And so they took the dinghy across and they landed on the Scree Beach. Not quite sure where they left it. They bivvied that night and then they set off next morning. And as Nico put it, the cracks just kept on coming. And they made their way right to the top. And then in the evening light, because we're into late August by now, and it does get dusky at night, they abseiled back down to a bigger ledge to take a shiver bivvy. Called a shiver bivvy because however much gear you put on, they found you only get 4 hours sleep or so before the cold wakes you up with a significant bite. Next morning, invented the sling and abseiled back down. Oops. Coming down this face here, and then took the way to the beach here, picked up the dinghy, and came out to the boat. Actually, it was nothing like that, because it was very, very rough. And it's very difficult to pick up climbers with all their gear when the wind is gusting to 30 knots. I found that I tried to approach them very, very slowly upwind first, but as soon as I got anywhere near, the wind would blow the dinghy off. So I had to go above them, as it were, and sail, or rather motor, down, reversing the engine every so often to keep it really, really slow. At last, they managed to grasp the guardrails, to throw their gear on, and to lever themselves on board once again, and we were okay. Can anything stop them? You'd think this overhang would, but no, they're over the top of that as well. And then there was Sean's, I call it his Mallory moment, because Mallory, remember when he was asked, why do you want to climb Everest? Because it's there, he said. And for Sean, any bit of rock, he wants to climb it because it's there. Even though this was off route in a sense, the route went on really up the face on the right-hand side, but no, Sean had to climb Bush Mountain. Of course, in modern climbing, and when you're going to be on the face, as they were on one of them, 10 days, there's an immense amount of gear and food and water that you need to take up with you. But really the most important part of all that was their musical instruments. When they climbed Impossible Wall, they were rained off for 3 days, and all they did was sit in their portaledges and compose songs and sang to themselves. Mind you, by the third day, they were really pretty fed up. But as I say, there we are, 2 little portaledges there, gives you some idea of the scale of these climbs that they undertake. Well, we all make mistakes, and they were very keen that I should join them on a climb on our first expedition together. It was not too bad to begin with. In fact, it was a very nice warm-up phase. But just about this time, a voice came from above, Bob, this is a little bit longer and a little bit harder than we thought. And it was. And here am I, stuck in this crack, with nothing very much to pull up on. And my left foot was completely jammed in the crack, and I could not get it out. Maneuvered, it must have been for at least 20 minutes to half an hour, and eventually it came out, moved onto this buttress on the right. Sean, I've got the other foot stuck now. But eventually, completely shattered and exhausted, I arrived at the top. And as I say, it was far too hard, and you'll not be surprised to hear that I named the climb Never Again. And in fact, that was the last real climb that I have done. But I was 75, so I suppose there's something in that. But at any rate, it made me a fully paid up member of the Wild Bunch, singing and dancing and high fives and yelling and screaming at the top of the climb. Or again, this last summer, I got in somebody else's boat with the Wild Bunch to East Greenland at last. I'd been to West Greenland many times, but I'd never been to East Greenland. And here we are in the stunning Scoresby Sund, halfway up the east coast of Greenland. They're gone to climb Mirror Wall, but unfortunately, not only was it completely sheer, but it turned out to be pretty well holdless. They got as far as this, which was a pretty good effort, but were faced with a completely blank section. They didn't want to use bolts and to use artificial climbing. Part of the ethic of their climbing, which I thoroughly approve, is that they want to climb everything free. So they decided in the end that they would have to withdraw and come back another day. That, incidentally, is where they had put their portaledge. But it didn't matter because we in the boat had made a circumnavigation of Milne Land, quite a big chunk of territory, an island, in fact, whilst they were on the climb. And anyhow, it was Scoresby Sound was such a beautiful place. So are my books saying that we're as good as Tilman? Not at all. What it is trying to say is that we have tried to follow his initiative and follow in his steps and to go to remote areas and to climb unclimbed mountains or rock faces in his footsteps, as it were. So Tilman, as I say, enigmatic, distinguished, skillful, determined, minimalist. I think these were the cooking arrangements aboard Mischief, a primer stove up on a plate to get the flame to boil the kettle. But for all that, an innovator, determined, as I say, but taciturn. I don't think he really ever communicated very much with his crew or briefed them. I get the impression that things were difficult from that point of view. I admire him and he's my mentor, but I have to confess that I'm rather pleased that I never actually sailed with him. But it was still one of the proudest moments of my life when the president of our Alpine club dubbed me the modern Tilman. But as long as you realize that really I'm just an old has-been now, that's okay. And there are always the books. Thank you very much.
Bob, thank you very, very much indeed. Can you unshare your screen, Bob, so that you can see other people? And I'm going to ask people to put their electronic hand up if they want to come in and ask some questions or make some comments or whatever. So I'm scanning the screens, looking for hands going up. You've almost unshared.
Okay, so what do I do? Oh, what do I do now?
The way where you hit the button saying share screen, Bob, you should be able to now unshare it. I might have to do it for you.
No, I've got to zoom. I may have to start again here.
So we've got a question from Bryony. Let me bring Bryony in. Bryony, you should be able to open your microphone anytime soon, and then after that we'll go to Kathy Mansfield. Bryony, can you hear me? Nothing heard from Bryony at the moment. Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can do.
Kathy, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, great to see you, Bob. Saw you just a month ago.
Yes, indeed.
Which was a great time. I was just wondering how you managed to get a new mast down in the Falklands. That must have been quite a trick to do.
Well, yes, fortunately we were insured. Pantenius had insured us very generously, really. And I had formed a charitable charity before we went off. So I appealed to the trustees back in UK, and they set about getting a new mast from Proctor's. And there was then some discussion or dispute or whatever about flying it out. and who was going to pay for it flying out. But eventually Pantenius did so, and the mast just fitted in the underneath the accommodation, the luggage compartment, if you like, on the TriStar, and was flown out to Mount Pleasant, and then put on a low loader and brought over to Port Stanley. And there's a dock there now, left over from the 1982 conflict. And the crane driver was helpful there and lifted it up and left us to secure it over lunch. And so we got a new mast.
Thank you very much, Bob. That is quite
I'm sorry, I
amazing.
mean, these photos are nothing like as good as yours, Kat.
Oh, they're astonishing, absolutely astonishing. But I got to East Greenland before you did, Bob. Anyway, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Bryony, do you want to come in now?
Obviously, somebody else has difficulty with this IT.
Yeah. We've still got a lot of people online, but I can't see a lot of hands up. So apologies if I'm missing something. I can't see anything in the chat either. So I'm just inviting people to.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
yeah.
can. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm in my front room. I'm a young sailor in my 30s, and I'm still developing my skills. I have been sailing in Scotland for like 2 summers,
Oh, yeah.
so I can see how the mountaineering and the other outdoor sports really complement sailing. I just wanted to know what skills could we develop on land, or kind of what skills have maybe started to be lost that we need to keep kind of up. So I was thinking about sail making, or more like boat repairs and celestial navigation, kind of get a bit forgotten about, but still are really important to learn how to do these things. I didn't know if you had any advice on if there's anything else to really grasp a bit more for higher latitudes.
Right. Well, that's a rather difficult question.
I'm not sure if it's really a question, but yeah. I don't know.
I'll jump in there.
If there's anything extra you think you need as a skipper.
I'll jump in there, Bryony, while Bob's scratching his head. But boat maintenance through and through and through. Wherever we go with our boat, we have spent huge amounts of time on fixing things. And when you go into high latitudes, there's nobody else to fix it, so you can't outsource it. So definitely major on that. Celestial navigation, I'm not sure that's going to help you in the modern age, but Bob, you may have very different thoughts.
No, I was going to hazard the thought that you probably wouldn't need the celestial navigation these days. It is, of course, a stopgap if everything else should fail. But really, we have been spoiled, and even when we were sailing around the world, by that time we were spoiled in that we did have GPS. At that stage, you just took the coordinates from the GPS and you plotted them on a paper chart. But nowadays you can do it all electronically, I gather, and you have chart plotters and all the rest of these wonderful instruments. In fact, I was introduced, this may be a digression, this last summer, where the skipper of the boat that I was on going to East Greenland did everything on his phone, which I found quite disturbing, really, because the navigation was done on the phone, the weather forecasts, the weather and wind direction. And so we, the crew, didn't really know where we were or which way the wind was due to come or anything else, because it was all being done by the skipper on his phone. So this is a new thought to me, and obviously a development from the days when I used to skipper boats across the Atlantic and so forth. So yeah, GPS, I think you can pretty well rely on it now. It's not a bad idea to have several GPSs around just in case your chart plotter goes off. If you have a battery GPS as well as a backup, that's quite a good idea. I haven't known it to fail. Well, that's not quite true, actually. In the days when GPS was just coming on, I was sailing back from the Azores one year. It was called sat nav in those days, and it gave you a position every 3/4 of an hour or something. And it all suddenly went dead. I hadn't done astro for a few years, so I had to look at the books very hurriedly and start calculating again. And fortunately, 2 days later, it came back on again, and we were only 5 miles out in my estimate from where the GPS told us that we were. But that's a digression. Really, all I would say is do as much climbing from the boat as you can, and just be ready to maintain your systems on board. Not a very satisfactory answer, but a bit of a difficult question.
And Brian, the huge advantage that we have over Tilman's generation, and to some extent Bob's generation, is the availability of satellite information. So cruising in high latitude waters, particularly Greenland and Canada, there is fantastic summary charts and Copernicus satellites giving you real time what you're heading into. And now that's all available either through Iridium or increasingly now Starlink. It really does change the way you can plan from day to day. Whereas, of course, I don't think Tilman had any of that information. When he tried 4 times to get into Scoresby Sound, he didn't really have any meaningful weather or ice chart information. I think if he was sailing with modern technology, he would have had very different outcomes. We've got a question from Judith. Judith Jacobson, do you want to open your microphone, Judith?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hi, Bob. I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much. When we recently sailed through Patagonia, I read all Tilman's books and had a great fun doing that, but I'm definitely not a climber. I apparently have enough trouble walking on flat land as I've fallen a few times. So anyways, so I was just wondering, so to be a real Cap Horner, you have to cross 50 degrees on either side of South America. But do you have to do it without stops?
Actually, officially, that is so. That you should do it without stops. They were very kind and allowed me to join the Cape Horn Association, though we had stopped in Antarctica. But they thought I suppose, having lost the mast in Antarctica and jury-rigged back and gone down again, as you put it, I think you've done enough now to earn being a Cape Horn Associate. So the answer to your question is officially yes, but there may be concessions granted on that occasion, on those occasions.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we didn't make it to Antarctica, so yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Brandy, just for bringing the next person, whereabouts are you based? Are you based in Scotland? I think she's got a microphone closed at the moment. We'll maybe come back to her afterwards.
I'm based on the Isle of Wight, so I'm based south coast of England.
Oh, okay. Okay, but you were sailing in Scotland this year, I think you said.
Yes.
Yeah, super. Good. Great. I've opened George Arneson's microphone, so go ahead, George.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
Bob, thank you very much. Great talk. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on living conditions on board when you had your great adventures in a relatively small boat, albeit bigger than my boat. But I'm just sort of thinking, you know, crew of you and 4 sort of hairy climbers, all your kit, the climbing kit, tents, sleeping bags, skis, pulks, the lot. You know, how did you all fit it in and still have space to sail, to exist on you know, on significant ocean crossings as well?
with difficulty is the answer, but it was amazing, really. I have to say that the westerly discus it does have quite a lot of storage space when you really come to look around. I lost one, as you know, and renewed it and bought another westerly discus. In the meantime, I looked around at other boats to see whether any of them would suit. And I remember looking at a Sadler 34, for instance, a foot longer than the 33, and thought, well, that must have quite a lot of storage space. Actually, it had much less. It's amazing how much storage space there actually was on the westerly discus. And of course, I've got to say, we didn't live very tidily. So there was gear around on the cabin floor. There were barrels as well. There was a barrel on the seat, the aft seat behind the wheel, full of climbing gear and so forth. Storage was underneath the bunks, which is a bit of a nuisance, but all the same, it was quite a generous storage. And there were 5 of us, so it did mean that I had 2 in the aft, 2 in the saloon, and then only 1 in the forepeak. So it did mean there was a spare bunk in the forepeak, which again was filled with gear and stores and stuff that we needed to put there. So it was with difficulty. But it did work out, and it did work out too on quite hairy Atlantic crossings and all the rest.
So this year, Bob, you were sailing in a much bigger boat, and presumably had loads of room. Is that right?
Well, too much room, actually, in one sense, in that I found that there was not enough to hold on to in the saloon, for instance. And the galley was straight fore and aft galley on the starboard side. And if you were on starboard tack, you could quite easily be thrown completely across the saloon to the other side. There was nothing to sit on that side as well. But yes, there were 7 of us on board, which was too many, but all the same, he had done a tremendous job in preparing the boat. He picked it up for a song in Trinidad and welded steel plates all over the hull, got it sailing very well, but there was still quite a lot still to be done inside by way of safety and comfort and so forth. So it was quite a hard boat to live on, in fact. And one of the problems was, I think, that you could be thrown around quite easily.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to just ask some other people to talk. They haven't got their hands up. I'm just going to nobble them. I can see Andrew Wilkes is online. Of course, there's nobody knows more about the Arctic and than Andrew. Andrew.
Yes, I'm certainly not taking a question from Andrew.
Andrew, do you want to poke your question at Bob?
Hello, Bob. I just wanted to say a fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. I've always found Tilman quite difficult to read. I haven't managed to get through a whole book of his, though I've got through several books of yours. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very kind of you. I do enjoy Tilman's sort of wry sense of humor, and the Chinese proverbs, of course, and that's the sort of thing. And he makes unpolitically correct remarks, which really you could not make in polite society today.
not in public, but
not in public anyway. No.
And so, future plans, Bob? Any future plans?
Well, I have found in my old age that it's easier to sail downwind than against the wind. So I've got a nice downwind passage in January, but only just going from Morocco to Cape Verdes. But I remember when we were sailing around the world, it was a lovely passage from the Canaries to Cape Verdes. So I'm quite looking forward to that. And well, Azores is rather an attractive proposition. So I'm seeing whether I can get on other people's boats to go down there.
That's great, Bob. We'll very much look forward to bumping into you again. I remember the first time we did it was in Greenland, and Murad taught the Wild Bunch how to play the spoons, and I hope you've forgiven us now for the consequences of that.
I do remember you having a race up your rigging between the Wild Bunch and yourself. I won't disclose who won it in the end.
I'm absolutely sure, and everyone else will be. It was them. Thank you, Bob. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Lovely
you.
to hear you again.
Thanks,
Thank
Andrew. Andrew, and sorry for nobbling you, but I've asked Anne Hammock if she'd open her microphone, and you have a microphone.
Can you hear me?
Ah,
We
yes,
can indeed. We can indeed. Go ahead, Anne.
Now we're in trouble. We have the editor.
I'm not sure why you've called on me to speak. I mean,
Well,
all I can say is that I had calls recently to look through, and Bob has now written for Flying Fish 28 times in, I think, somewhat over 30 years. I mean, Bob, nobody's going to beat that. So do go on writing, but don't feel you have to. And if anybody who's listening to this would like a list, because all of those issues are available on the website, if anyone wants to read through all that Bob has written, actually you'd do far better to buy his books, I should say. I don't want to deprive you of royalties, Bob. I'm too much of a writer myself to do that. But no, all I can say is I vastly admire all of you guys who go north, but gosh, it's not for me. I was shivering in my bunk a few weeks ago. Woke in the middle of the night and it was 3 degrees down below. And, you know, that was bad enough for me, and that's Cornwall.
Lovely to hear you, Anne.
And you, Bob. Thanks. It was a great talk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I'm sorry for nobbling you, but you came up trumps, so thank you very much. I don't see that anybody else has got their hands up, Bob. So I think we can let you off for the evening, and thank you very very much for being our mentor, our inspiration, and all those other things. And we've certainly very much appreciated our advice, the advice that we've had off you over the years. And I think it was back in 1997 or something that. When I first spoke to you about going to Greenland, and you just said, yeah, just do it, which is clearly the right advice, and we've adhered to it all the way. So, Bob, thank you very, very much. You are an OCC treasure, and thank you for dialing in tonight. Thank you for mastering the IT, which you have done so with aplomb. And thank you, everybody else, for dialing in. Next week, we have the mystery topic of Suddenly Alone, which is a discussion really about what difficulties a cruising couple or a thinly crewed boat would encounter should one of them be incapacitated for any reason. It's a discussion rather than a tutorial. As I expect, it's going to take many hours to go through it in detail. But we just wanted to introduce the discussion to see whether we should, as a club, be tapping into some of the other resources that are out there, particularly in North America. It's big in the Cruising Club of America and other yacht clubs throughout the Northeast and Northwestern states. So thank you very much for dialing in this evening. We'll see you again on Thursday at 8 o'clock next week. Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you.